Common knowledge of Custer's last stand merely scratches the surface. This account concerns the conflict's most poignant artifact, a truth concealed by a final, defiant gesture and the macabre conclusion obscured in secrecy for generations. A secret valued at $2.2 million lay interred beneath the slain at Little Bighorn. While surveying a horrific scene of 210 disfigured remains 2 days post-massacre, burial crews discovered something beneath one body that wasn't another casualty. They recovered a solitary, immaculate cavalry standard, shielded from ruin by the trooper who elected to perish atop it. What made this particular banner so significant that a man would expend his final moment to conceal it? You may question how fabric could hold such monetary value, yet perhaps the true mystery involves the shocking tale of its preserver. What intelligence did he possess that rendered this guidon more precious than his existence? The revelation transforms our perception of those frantic last moments on Last Stand Hill. During a balmy summer day in 1876, within the untamed American West, a confrontation ignited that shocked the country and reverberated across time. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was not merely a military engagement. It was a brutal and indelible collision that permitted no survivors save Frank Finkel, while exposing narratives of bravery, terror, and endurance beyond imagination. This evening, we are examining the wounds inflicted upon that terrain and upon the spirits who beheld it. To help preserve these accounts, consider subscribing as we reveal the reality behind its enduring myths. On June 25, 1876, the Battle of the Little Bighorn resulted in the total annihilation of 5 companies from the U.S. 7th Cavalry, led by George Armstrong Custer. White Wolf was among the witnesses, later recounting how youths scouring the fallen soldiers discovered rectangular green paper slips stored in their pockets. Unacquainted with currency, indigenous children repurposed these notes as miniature saddle blankets for their clay toy horses. Silver currency was likewise gathered, later being fashioned into ornamental buckles by Cheyenne craftsmen. Combatants present, including Wooden Leg, Little Hawk, and Bobtail Horse, later recounted locating whiskey bottles among the deceased cavalrymen. On June 27th, 2 days following the engagement, soldiers traversed the bleak, marred terrain of the battleground, encountering a spectral vista of carnage and ruin that etched itself indelibly upon one observer's memory. He confessed it was an image from which he could never escape. The remains of Captain Tom Custer were located near a hill summit just north of his brother. He was prone, his features rendered unidentifiable. His corpse displayed numerous arrow impacts, including to the back and the skull, where one point had twisted and lodged firmly. His cranium was fractured, and almost all of his scalp had been taken, except for a narrow section at the base of his neck. Conversely, General Custer's form was not defaced. He was reclining on his spine, his arms crossed over his chest, a characteristic stance familiar to those who had campaigned with him. He sustained 2 lethal injuries, one to his left temple's front and another close to his chest. Boston Custer, the youngest sibling, was found roughly 200 yards from the primary hill. His corpse had been denuded of all attire save for a set of white socks, from which the identifying marks had been meticulously excised. Littering the ground, other deceased displayed remnants of bloodied undergarments, pants, or hosiery, yet in each case the fabric bearing their names had been sliced off. The appalling spectacle of denuded and brutalized bodies, each marked with mortal injuries, composed a picture of unimaginable dread. Equipped with merely a handful of implements, several shovels, a few axes, and 2 picks, the troops performed their utmost to inter their fallen brethren. Employing blades and metal cups, they hastily entombed the dead under thin strata of soil, abandoning them in the wilds, isolated from society, and distant from the solace of kin. Trumpeter John Martini remembered encountering a pile of slain troopers in a steep gully separating Custer's last stand from the river. Among them was a first sergeant, his corpse scattered with fragments of roughly $500 in paper money which had been placed in his care by the soldiers he led. Martini also noted that a portion of Adjutant Cook's whiskers had been scalped, the flesh still attached. Scout George Harrington of the 7th Cavalry further stated that 4 severed soldiers' heads were discovered in the Sioux encampment, although their corresponding bodies were never found on the field or within the village. A subsequent account from Lieutenant Charles Rowe of the 2nd Cavalry described finding the severed head of a white man fastened to a lariat within the Indian village, where it had been pulled throughout the encampment until finally separating from its torso. Jacob Adams, another survivor, remembered cavalrymen being lassoed from their mounts and hauled into the center of the settlement, there to be bound to trees and set ablaze. These atrocities were witnessed by their fellow soldiers from Benteen's column, who were powerless to provide assistance. John Ryan later observed that bones and fragments of blue clothing were discovered at locations where individuals had been secured to stakes and trees. From the 5 guidons originally borne by Custer's battalion, a single one was located directly after the fight. It had been concealed under the corpse of Corporal John Foley, who had tried to flee on his horse. Chased by warriors, Foley ended his own life with a pistol shot to the head before he could be captured. The banner, safeguarded by his body, was later designated the Culbertson Guidon, after Sergeant Ferdinand Culbertson, a member of the burial detail that retrieved it. In 2010, this standard was purchased at Sotheby's by a private bidder for a remarkable $2.2 million. When the smoke cleared from the Little Bighorn battlefield, the reverberations of that decisive encounter persisted. Stories of courage, atrocity, and misfortune etched into the legacy of a confrontation that permanently altered the American West. Thus silence finally fell upon the greasy grass. We inherit these stark contradictions. A general, strangely serene in his final repose, encircled by his brutally slain troops. A flag, an emblem of expansion, secreted under a dead soldier to preserve it. An artifact born of a terrible loss that now fetches a fortune. Our exploration has traversed the tumult of combat, passed through the quiet of burial grounds, and arrived at the polished glass of a display cabinet. We have witnessed how a rectangle of silk embroidered with national symbols can narrate a more profound tale, not solely of Custer's aspirations, but of a single trooper's ultimate, determined deed. In his final breath, Corporal John Foley elected to safeguard an emblem. Was this valiance? A sense of obligation? Or merely the fundamental human urge to rescue one final fragment of structure from the absolute bedlam that had engulfed them all? The essential calamity of Little Bighorn extends beyond the fall of a gallant leader to the savage, gruesome annihilation of an entire unit. A sobering testament to the price paid when worlds clash with devastating results. We recall it not for a valiant final defense, but for the unresolved dilemmas it bequeaths to us, queries concerning integrity, remembrance, and the nature of what we truly prize. This leads us to our challenging finale, the reflection I present to you now. So, as this banner rests behind glass, valued at a fortune, we are left with the ultimate haunting contradiction. The very symbol Custer's men carried to claim this land became, in the end, not a flag of conquest, but one of concealment. Foley didn't die for it. He died on it, using his own body not to save a nation's pride, but to bury a single, personal truth in the dirt. The real mystery of Little Bighorn isn't what we found on that field, but what we are still uncovering within ourselves. What stories do we choose to valorize, and which truths do we, ourselves, quietly bury? The battle ended in 1876, but the struggle over its meaning, the conflict between the symbol and the blood-soaked reality, is an auction that has never closed. What do you think was truly being hidden that day? Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to help support our community.